Christmas time is supposed to be a time when people get together to celebrate. They exchange gifts, they spend time together with family, friends, coworkers, and enjoy themselves. And sometimes events happen that take that happiness away from people, take it away from children, parents, and loved ones. And I'm just sharing a couple of stories during this month of December leading up to Christmas. And I just want to, I thought about this a few days ago. This might bring some people down as the holidays approach. But I would like to think that it would help people to celebrate a little bit more, knowing that if nothing like this has ever happened in your life and your family is all still together and you know where your children and your family members are, it's all the more reason to give you a reason to celebrate with those people. Now, today I'm going to share the story of Parris Hopson. In Northeast Ohio, countless families are desperate for answers. This week we focus on Parris Hopson, a young woman who was only 26 years old when she vanished on Christmas Day 2019. According to her family, she went out for a walk in Stark County, Ohio, and never returned. This year she would be turning 31. 5 years have passed with no answers. Take a good look at her face and think about her family and friends waiting for closure. Parris was a black female. She was age 26 when she went missing. She was 5'2" and 220 pounds. She has brown hair and brown eyes. She was wearing blue jeans, black boots, a burgundy shirt, and carrying a black purse. It was Christmas Day, of course. Had she been with family or was she walking to someone's house? They said she went out for a walk and yet she was carrying her purse. Now, I walk myself quite a bit and I never carry my purse when I go walking. So was she going for a walk for exercise or was she walking to a destination where she would have been carrying her purse? Now, I went to Reddit and someone said this woman was a smoker. She smoked, but she left behind her cigarettes. Now, I'm just going to read this. This is from Reddit. This is from Unresolved Mysteries. Her cell phone was found left on charge in her car. Today I want to share a story about a young woman from Columbus, Ohio named Parris Hopson. She was 26 and she went missing on Christmas Day 2019. Before Parris went missing, her family had already endured tragedy. In the early morning hours of June 16, 2017, Parris's brother Parris was involved in a hit-skip accident that eventually took his life. Parris was seated in the passenger seat of his own vehicle while it was being driven by someone else. Police don't know who was driving Parris's vehicle that morning, but the driver caused a head-on collision and fled the scene, leaving the accident on foot, leaving Parris in the passenger seat. Police assumed at first that Parris was the driver who had left the scene and the car was registered to him. But after visiting his home after the accident and asking his girlfriend if she had seen him, they were able to determine that Parris was the passenger who had been in this accident, not the driver. Parris survived in the hospital on life support until April, when he succumbed. Now, this happened in June, and he lived on life support until April, when he succumbed to his injuries. At the age of 23, he left behind 2 young children. His daughter was born while he was in this hospital on life support, so he never got to meet her. Parris and Parris had a close relationship. In fact, Parris chose to name his newborn daughter after his sister. According to some reports, Parris had taken it upon herself to uncover the person responsible for driving her brother's car and causing his death. Now, some of the rumors indicate that she may have been closing in on discovering the true identity of the driver and getting ready to report and turn this person in, and then suddenly she herself goes missing. She thought that she was getting enough proof needed to turn this person into the police when she vanished. However, other things that I've read sound as if everyone knew who was driving the car, but there was never enough evidence. So people are saying that either she found out who was driving the car, she was trying to gather enough evidence on them to turn them in, or she already knew and maybe she had confronted this person and told them, I know you were driving and I know you are, I'm getting ready to turn you into the police. Parris was very vocal about her brother's accident, and she was quoted in several news articles about it. The family believed the car was the main piece of evidence in Parris's death investigation and was still being combed for clues. So, Parris himself was not intoxicated. They did blood alcohol. He was not intoxicated. Some people might have believed that the driver was driving the car because of that. They don't know if the person driving the car was drunk because they left the scene and nobody was able to identify them. The car was being used in these in a prom at a local high school prom to warn children, warn young teenagers about the dangers of drinking and driving. The family was upset about that because they said the car was still involved in this unsolved crime. So they got upset about that, and she spoke out about that.
The same car he was killed in popped up in front of Parris High School. The family says it was there to promote their Prom Promise campaign. Picture of Parris's car right after the accident, and his car in front of the school, neither of which his sister Parris. Our family was under the impression that the car was still being held as evidence in this ongoing investigation. Parris Hopson was just 22 years old when he got into a car accident that would eventually end his life. My brother, he has been to multiple healthcare facilities. He fighting for his life for 10 months. Last month, Hopson passed away, and just as his friends and family were starting to cope with the fact that they would never see him again, the same car he was killed in popped up in front of Parris High School. The family says it was there to promote their Prom Promise campaign, which tries to deter teens from drinking and driving. Our family was under the impression that the car was still being held as evidence in this ongoing investigation. The only problem is the Hopson family never consented to it, and their loved one was not drinking and driving. It was definitely not the way Parris would want to be represented, or our family would want him to be represented or remembered.
Now, Parris disappeared on Christmas Day. Parris and her mother, Rochelle, were visiting Parris's grandmother, and it sounds as if the pair had traveled from Columbus. They had not stayed the previous night. They had arrived that morning. Parris's relatives also gathered at the family gathering report that Parris was acting strangely that day. She was pacing and appeared anxious. Her mother told police and others that Parris had been suffering from insomnia, and her mother told her maybe she should go outside and get some fresh air. Eventually, Parris told her family that she was going to go for a walk to clear her head. She slipped out of her mother's home and said she was heading to nearby Shriver Park. A neighbor saw Parris and spoke with her that day. The neighbor claims to have seen Parris walking toward the park, and they greeted each other, and the two exchanged a Merry Christmas, and this was the last time that Parris was seen. Now, if people believe the neighbor that they saw her walking and exchanged a Merry Christmas and a greeting with her as she walked, then did someone decide to go out to the park to find her? After several hours of waiting for Parris to return, her relatives called the police to report her missing. They found her cell phone in her mother's car on the charger. It appears that she went for a walk without her phone, and I believe, reading between the lines, they were attempting to contact her on her phone when they heard the phone ringing and found that it was left in the car. They were able to look at her phone and see some of her messages and call history. They found no evidence that she was planning to meet with anyone that day. However, she had contacted a church pastor that day and asked about some church services that evening. The family told police that Parris seemed a little bit depressed, but they had no reason to believe that she intended to harm herself. Parris was allegedly in a relationship at the time, and her cousin says the man in question was trying to get Parris alienated away from her family. They couldn't find any more information on this man. I don't know if police went and spoke with him. This writer of this article says they're going to leave that alone for the time being because no one was ever named as a suspect as far as a boyfriend or anything like that. On Parris's Facebook profile, she was posting pretty actively up until her disappearance. Many of her posts are public, and I found that several indicate that she had gone through a breakup in November or early December, just before she disappeared. So here are some questions people ask. Did Parris do something to herself from her grief and depression over the loss of her brother and this breakup with this boyfriend? Did Parris meet up with a boyfriend or an ex? And did this person harm her? Considering she was hours away from where she lived at the time, the man that she was involved with was in Columbus, Ohio, and she was several hours away. This doesn't seem very likely. And I'm sure if the police did go talk to him, he probably gave them an alibi. She reportedly had been quite anxious and was pacing back and forth. Parris told her relatives that she was going to go for a walk to clear her head. Her family members thought that she would only be gone for a little while, but she never returned. It's believed that Parris was headed towards Shriver Park. Now, a lot of people in the comments on Reddit was talking about this relationship that she was in. I couldn't really find anything about that, but people were saying that this man was very controlling, that he had been trying to drive a wedge between Parris and her family, and he may have been putting some thoughts into her head about certain family members, and maybe it was weighing on her. Some people believe that he's guilty, that maybe he had texted her, called her that day to meet him. Maybe he was angry and upset with her that she'd left to go with her mother to spend Christmas. But I couldn't find anything saying if the police checked her phone calls and text messages to see if there was anything to point in his direction. So that's just speculation. Once she was reported missing, investigators asked her family about her mental health. Her loved ones said she'd been depressed and anxious and had spent quite a bit of time focusing on her this car accident, and trying to find out who had caused this accident, and walked away and left her brother there. And it goes on that one of her cousins talked about the man that she was dating and said that it was unclear if he had anything to do with her disappearance. But her family believed that he was causing her some problems. And that's just a little bit more. Her family said that she had never really had any mental health problems or anything like that, other than just being upset about her brother and trying to find out what was going on. She had texted a local preacher about attending church services that night, and that was the last phone call or text on her phone. And then there's a little bit more here about her brother's accident. When Shatara Hill heard a knock on her door at around 9 a.m., she wasn't going to answer. She was 6 months pregnant and still laying in bed. She thought maybe whoever it was would just call. But the knocking persisted, and so she got up out of bed and went to the door. She found her boyfriend's uncle standing on her front porch. He told her that Parris Hopson Jr. had been seriously injured in a car crash and was hospitalized on a ventilator. He also told her that the person who had been driving the car had fled the scene, and to this day no one knows who that was. It was 6:15 a.m. on June 16, 2017, when Hopson suffered incapacitating injuries when someone driving his car passed another vehicle in a no passing zone on Southwest Street in Parris Township. They caused a head-on collision, and occupants of the other vehicle had minor injuries, and the car rolled on its top. On the 1-year anniversary of the crash, Hopson's family still didn't know who the person was that fled on foot, leaving Hopson unconscious in the front seat. And people remember him as a hard-working man. And his girlfriend, of course, was pregnant at the time that this accident happened, and the child never got to meet her father. According to Ohio, a highway patrol investigator, the crash is considered an open case, and police are still searching for leads. And Parris Hopson, the girl who went missing in this story, says, "There are people who know what happened. I know in my heart that there's one person out there that is carrying around these answers." And this is really where this case stands, and people do believe that Parris was getting close to finding out who this person was that caused this accident, and she was about ready to reveal, or she had pointed the finger at somebody, and a lot of people believe that's what caused her to go missing. A lot of people in the comments are saying that they believe Parris harmed herself in some way, but I tend to not believe that. Due to the fact that she was carrying her purse with her. Now, this was what witnesses said. Unless she had something inside of that purse, maybe some pills or a weapon of some sort, where is her body? If she went to this park, or if she went to some hidden place in the woods or something like that to do harm to herself, surely her body would have been discovered if the police were doing a search for her. I'm sure they went down and searched this park and the neighboring areas. And in 2019, we all know cameras were probably around. People had them on their homes and businesses. And so I couldn't find anything to say if the police were ever able to follow her tracks. A lot of people believe this is why she intentionally left her phone behind, because she didn't want to be tracked or traced. Maybe she had what is known as a burner phone, and she was planning to meet up with somebody over this discovery of who this person was that was driving her brother's car. There's a lot of different... Now, one person says this: the area where she went missing is close to Canton, Ohio, which is well known for gang activities. If the brother's death was in any way gang-related, it wouldn't surprise me if they followed her there and someone abducted her and did away with her because they knew that she was closing in on them. I go through the comments. You find a lot of people like me who just give their own thoughts to it, but you also can find some people who live in that area who maybe heard more about it than the police put out. She was far from home. Not sure how familiar she was with this town. She was visiting her grandmother, so she may have had some connections to people in that town. How far would she have walked, and what was the weather like that day? According to what I went through and looked, it seemed like the weather was in the 50s that day. This was according to Akron, Ohio Airport. It was Christmas Day, so there probably wasn't any businesses open, and the streets would have been pretty quiet. There are many reasons why a person might be agitated. Did Parris believe that the person responsible for driving her brother's car was a family member and was in the home that day? Why was this person driving the car? The only reason I can imagine that someone would flee the scene of an accident, they caused the accident. They probably would have maybe gotten into some trouble if the driver of the other car was seriously injured. Purry, the brother, he was seriously injured. But what was the reason that they fled? They were not licensed, they were intoxicated or under the influence, or they had warrants. So did Parris believe that this person was a family member, and maybe they were there that day? Thanks for watching.